Well, Mano, that's not an easy question to answer, and it's a complex phenomenon that goes into issues around leaders versus leadership. And from my perspective, anyone can be a leader, if not the leader, in a particular collective. So the question is, rather than developing or identifying leaders, is how do you bring forth leadership in a particular system? And part of that is helping people to work together around adaptive challenges. So people having shared work, participating in leadership, can develop leadership capacity. Even though there's no shortage of leaders, there may be a shortage of leadership. I think one of the things that really accelerates leadership development is changing mindsets. So if you can only think about leadership as what the leader does in a particular context, then you're pretty much dependent on that leader. But if you can think of leadership in more inclusive ways, that anyone can be a leader, including your own self, that opens up the possibility for a lot more expertise to be brought to a particular challenge. In my particular case, what challenged my mindsets was a sabbatical I did, my very first one, when I left Penn State University and spent a year at the Center for Creative Leadership. And one of the aspects of CCL that was very frame-breaking and changing mindsets was this whole notion of how important organizations found leadership development to be. So it wasn't about trying to test or be a proponent of a particular leadership theory, is how do you develop the people who are going to participate in your leadership processes and organizations, and how understudied that was. One of the best opportunities I had at CCL was to participate in their leadership development program, LDP. And it put me into a context with people around my same age who were in business, who were in government, who were in positions outside of academia, and learn new leadership kinds of skills, be involved in group kinds of exercises that brought in different perspectives than what I was hearing, and I brought different perspectives than what they were hearing. So it was really about this notion of building a shared capacity for leadership really on the ground in that particular program. So it was a great perk to be able to participate in leadership development programs while I was on sabbatical leave. All of the efforts around developing and testing different models of leadership was not addressing the fundamental question of how do we best develop leaders, how do we accelerate that development, and being able to understand what are the kinds of obstacles as well as drivers of leader development in organizations. Shared leadership is important, I think, and not as a replacement to traditional hierarchical leader-centric leadership, but something that needs to be called forth when there are very complex adaptive challenges that are being faced, where no one person knows the way forward. Traditional leadership models work if the leader has the answers or can come up with a direction for the collective to take. But environments are becoming a lot less predictable, more complex, more volatile. The term I used when we were talking in session was this notion of VUCA, which is the opposite of deja vu. I've never been here before. I don't know who can help me. I have no idea how to go forward from here. The only way forward in those kinds of situations is if a collective learns their way out of that situation. So the learning is something that takes place in the interactions and the dynamics among the people in the collective that's facing that adaptive challenge. So you have to be open to ideas, open to influence, open to expertise from anyone in that group, and that's how we have breakthroughs in terms of learning our way out of environmental kinds of crises that no one has a ready answer for. We don't see that very often, and part of the reason why we don't see that often is that we don't think about leadership in a shared fashion like that. But one example that does come to mind is from the military complex, and I've done some work with both the U.S. Army as well as the Singaporean Armed Forces. And when you talk about special forces kinds of groups, these are groups of warriors who go into the most dangerous, most unpredictable, volatile kinds of situations. And there is a rank and a hierarchy within their group, but they know that they need to rely on each other in order to conquer the environment. And so anyone is a leader in that particular situation, and they absolutely need anyone in that particular unit to step forward when he or she sees a threat that they can make sense of that others cannot. And to me, that is probably the truest form of shared leadership on the ground that we can see in action.